In order to answer this question, I must reference my poster, film, and review. For my poster, the main technology that I used was Adobe Photoshop. This was a software I used last year in order to create all three products, so I was comfortable using this software. However, I watched tutorial videos, such as the one on your screen, so I could grasp how to manipulate images in an effective manner. For example, the doll on my poster. This doll was manipulated in a way that the bottom of its dress is almost consumed, and it shows that it's not visible. This is to show that the doll lurks in darkness and suggests that the background consumed the doll just like the doll consumes the daughter in the film. This software was very successful as I was able to make, edit, and manipulate my poster and other images I needed for my poster. There weren't many problems except for when I wanted to make my background darker. I wanted to do this without using a brightness filter. I realized I could use a color and gradient overlay over my background to make the poster darker, giving it an eerie feel. As you can see here, I used the gradient and color overlay effect on the background. However, when I put the doll on the poster, the doll looked very dark and it couldn't be distinguished from the background. So I had to compromise and add a brightness filter on the poster, which did make the background lighter but the doll stand out and made the doll appear more scary. As you can see here, if I take away the brightness filter, the doll can't be distinguished from the background. However, if I add it on, the doll is easily distinguished from the background. Even though it adds a lighter effect to the poster, it makes the doll look even more scarier. Other technologies that I used included Google. Google is a search engine. I almost use it at every stage of production. I use Google to research posters, and also I needed to find a suitable font for my credits, which I did find. I downloaded a font called Steel Tongues. This enabled me to create real credits and make my poster appear more realistic. Furthermore, I used WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a popular social media app. This is a social media app that I use to my advantage. I created a group consisting of people that informed every stage of my poster. They helped me make decisions in my background, images, and mastheads. And this made my poster fit the needs of a select target audience, which was 18 to 24-year-olds. This was very successful as I was able to share my ideas so quickly and efficiently. As you can see, this was demonstrated very effectively during my journey of my second draft of my horror poster, which is found on my blog. For my film, the main technology that I used was Adobe Premiere Pro. This is a software I never used before, so I had to watch tutorial videos on YouTube. However, my role in the creation of my short horror film was sound, and these videos were mostly targeted at editing. So I found expert advice, and they guided me in showing me how to escalate sounds, how to mix sounds to make them sound more natural. This helped me as a horror film relies on jump scares, which I was able to create by making sounds louder. This software wasn't very successful at the start as I didn't know how to use it. However, as I got used to it more and more, my confidence grew and my knowledge grew. This enabled me to create jump scares that were so effective in my final draft of my short horror film. Other technologies I used included YouTube. As I mentioned earlier, I used tutorial videos to grasp knowledge on Adobe Premiere Pro. And I also used YouTube to research the types of sounds used in short horror movies. And I then used a website called soundbible.com to download horror sounds that would be suitable to fit my short horror movie. I also used a program called storyboard.com. This is a website that enabled me to create an initial storyboard for my horror movie. This was a good storyboard as it enabled me to add dialogue, the editing transitions, the camera angles, and even mise-en-scène. However, I was given only 6 boxes, so my storyboard was limited. It cost money to get more boxes, so this was the main problem with the program. And finally, my review. In my review, the main piece of technology that I used was Photoshop. Photoshop was suitable for this as I was able to create a double page spread in order to use for my review. I was able to keep the columns the same size and able to edit, manipulate, and create all in one software. Using Photoshop was very successful. As I mentioned before, I used Photoshop to create my products last year, and I used it to create my horror poster this year. So I was very familiar with the software. I utilized my knowledge to create a review that follows the conventions of other horror movie reviews, and was able to use effects such as the stroke to make certain text stand out. As you can see, this text was the title of the film that I used, and I added a stroke on there just to make it look more appealing. I also used Google to research existing horror reviews and even reviews of other genres, so I could gain knowledge over how these reviews looked and the style it needed. I implemented these key conventions in my own review, so this technology was successful as it allowed me to research existing reviews. Furthermore, Prezi was very vital in demonstrating some of my work. For example, at the start of the year, I was asked to create a conventions of horror presentation. I created this on Prezi, and also for my film, I created a prop list on Prezi. These are most of the technologies that I used and how I used them to the standard that I needed.